Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. Today we're diving back into 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death. We did the first 50 already, and if you missed those videos, no sweat. This is an anthology series, so every ghost story stands on its own. There is a subtle story going on in between concerning a boy named Yuma and his abusive parents. I'll do a short recap of Yuma's story, but then we'll pick up right where we left off. This is 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death, part 3. In the first 50 stories, we met Yuma, a troubled boy who almost jumps out of a window when his friend Hina stalls him by telling him about the 100 ghost stories, and how if you tell all 100, a real ghost will come. So Yuma starts telling the stories. He seems to be talking directly to the reader, but I suspect this to be some kind of an important object that he's talking to. As he tells the stories, we learn that Yuma has abusive parents. His stepmom constantly verbally insults him, and his dad is straight up scary, often physically attacking him. The more stories Yuma tells, the more supernatural things begin to happen, and Yuma alludes to a dark presence being in the house. At one point, in self-defense from his mother, Yuma stabs her in the hand with a pencil, and later she's physically attacked by some force, putting her in the hospital for a while. Since that attack, the cops have been sniffing around, one of which starts getting strange bruises that spread across his body. This all culminates in the cop's arm being brutally broken by an unseen force, and he's dragged out of Yuma's window, which pretty much brings us up to speed. So let's get into the 51st story, What You Can't See. Yuma appears to be dragging something heavy and wrapped in a sheet into his room with the help of Hina. Once they set it down, Hina looks pretty frightened and says they should call an ambulance, but Yuma pulls back the sheet to show her that they're too late, implying the cop is dead. He says he'll figure it all out and asks her not to tell anyone what happened. After she leaves, he stands shaking, feeling guilty, but he reassures himself that it wasn't his fault and that he needs to keep telling the stories, which leads us to 51. A man wakes up to his alarm sounding, but he fumbles when he tries to put on his glasses and knocks them to the floor. As he leans down to pick them up, we see from his blurry-eyed perspective, and in the corner of the panel appears to be a human foot. He quickly puts his glasses on and looks up, but no one's there. It must have been his imagination. It's been a stressful week, and he decides to start the day with a warm bath, setting his glasses down while he rinses his face. He looks up when he finishes, and yet again we see the panel in his blurry vision. This time, outside the bathroom door, a tall figure seems to be watching him. The man freaks out and puts his glasses on, but there's no one there. This time he's convinced he saw someone and gets up to check the rest of the house, only to find no one around. He sits back down in the tub and pulls his glasses off to rub his eyes. In this brief moment, we can more clearly see what appears to be a woman with long hair walking toward him. Something seems off about her body, like it's bloody or disfigured, but it's actually more terrifying that we can't tell. The man yells, and this time he holds his glasses a few inches from his face, giving us a simultaneous look at the woman just feet away from him and also the empty room through his lenses. At this point, the guy pieces together that this thing is not human and runs out of the bath with his glasses still off. He looks back and we can see the blurry figure chasing after him. He screams at it to get back when suddenly the lights shut off. He puts his glasses back on and struggles to find the switch, but the lights click on by themselves. Shaking, he slowly removes his glasses again, only to find the ghastly woman inches from his face, this time in clear view, and it's horrifying. It's a clever idea for a horror story, and I'm sure it resonates even more with anyone who sees the blurry world like this guy without their glasses, such as myself. Story 52, Lord Oida. Yuma lugs a massive suitcase into his room, then sits down to tell the next story. It begins with a teen boy falling and scraping his knee pretty bad while at the market. He walks up to a shop where he finds an odd bracelet with the small charm of a man's face on it. He tries it on, and when the owner walks out, he assures him that he wasn't trying to steal it or anything like that. The shopkeeper says that the bracelet isn't his, but he knows what it is. He believes the young man has been chosen by Lord Oida, a god of protection. Should he suffer any injuries, Lord Oida will take them on instead. The shopkeeper then tells him to go ahead and take the bracelet home with him. The kid is a little weirded out, but starts walking home, and in an almost jarring panel, we see a tall, naked man with unnaturally long limbs, smiling and walking behind him. The kid turns around and falls to the ground scared, but no one else seems to see the guy. He notices that the tall man has a nasty scrape on his knee, and the kid's knee is now perfectly fine. Remembering what the shopkeeper said, he pieces together that this entity is Lord Oida, who has taken the damage from his knee onto himself. Well, this sounds great in theory, but Lord Oida stays right by the kid's side from then on, every waking second, even floating next to him while he sleeps. As it would anyone, this starts driving the kid crazy, and he asks Oida to leave him be, but the creepy dude doesn't respond. He then realizes he can't remove the bracelet either. Out of frustration, the teen bangs his head on his desk, and sure enough, the bruise appears on Oida instead. On a closer look, Lord Oida is a creepy looking guy. His eyes are half closed and his pupils go opposite directions. One day while walking down the stairs to the train, the kid stumbles and falls, getting brutally banged up all the way down. The people around him assume he'll need an ambulance for such a big fall, but thanks to Lord Oida, he's perfectly fine. He looks over at the entity, and we don't see him, but the boy seems pretty startled. Later, he travels back to the shopkeeper and says he doesn't want Oida's protection anymore, asking how to get rid of him. The shopkeep tells him he can separate from Oida, but doing so would mean taking back all the injuries that Oida suffered by the kid's side. The man asks if he'd be willing to do that, and the kid looks over at Oida, finally revealing his body, which is now torn up and mangled. His limbs are twisted and broken, and his head is bashed open. So I guess now the kid could either receive the terrible injuries and likely die, or have Lord Oida and his terrifying body continue to follow him around forever. Yuma ends the story and says not to worry, we're making it through the 100 stories no matter what. He then starts to lift the dead body in his room as if planning to put it into the suitcase. Story 53, Raised Hand. Yuma shoos a huge fly off of whatever he's talking to and gets started with the 53rd story. A teacher named Kayama seems almost scared when a student raises their hand just to go to the bathroom. He lets them go, then asks if anyone can answer the question on the board. One hand stands out at the back of the class. A young boy with a scared expression has his hand raised high, and no one else seems to notice him. Kayama ignores this, but looks pretty freaked out. Several instances of people raising their hands continue to scare Kayama. Another teacher asks him if he wants to go out for drinks, and he implies he doesn't really drink anymore. On the train ride home, Kayama is thrown off by the many hands in the air holding the rails for support. He then sees a small hand behind him reaching up. It's the young boy standing next to him with fear and agony in his eyes, as if he's about to cry out in terror. Kayama gets off the bus and is stopped by a policeman who asks his name. He immediately raises his hands and says he won't put up a fight. He confesses. We see his hands in cuffs and hear part of a news segment about a man accused of hitting a person at a crosswalk with his car and fleeing the scene. In a flashback, Kayama is driving drunk, nearly falling asleep when he looks up to see a young boy at the crosswalk. The poor kid is holding his hand up and crying out for Kayama to stop. Yuma ends the story and, noticing the flies around his room, decides he needs to hurry up and get rid of the body. He starts moving the suitcase and accidentally knocks it over, making a loud noise. The chapter ends with one of his parents asking what's going on in there. Story 54, Bait. Taking place immediately after the last chapter, Yuma is hunched over as if saying a prayer or something, and then he grabs his door handle as if to hold it closed and starts the next story. A man named Takanori talks about his friend Aya's Twitter account. Her last tweet ominously said, "I think I get it now," and 2 days later, they found her dead body. Still, Takanori can't bring himself to unfollow her account. He sadly looks at her old tweets, but then notices a brand new image posted on her account of just a black box. He starts speculating that someone must have hacked her account, and several tweets start popping up where Aya is mocking the living and talking about how great death is. What kind of sickos would do this to her account? Takanori investigates the dark photo again, and on a closer look, he thinks he sees something. He turns the brightness all the way up on his phone and sees the image hidden inside. It's Aya screaming. It's pretty frightening, and Takanori notices something else behind her. There's some graffiti that he actually recognizes from the communal bathrooms at a local park. Taking matters into his own hands, he decides to go check it out, hoping he could get a clue as to what happened to Aya, and if he sees anything, he'll call the police. He looks inside the bathroom stall with the familiar graffiti and sees nothing. Then he notices a fresh post from Aya. Another black picture. This time when he turns up the brightness, he actually sees a picture of the back of his own head. He tries to play it cool and slowly turns around, but no one's there. We then see a creepy guy standing over the bathroom stall and taking pictures. Just as Takanori notices him, the man puts a rope around his neck and starts strangling him, yelling out, "I caught ya." He takes a photo of Takanori's last moments alive, and it looks pretty similar to Aya's. The man asks if he's ever been fishing before, saying all you need to do is drop some bait and reel the sucker in who's dumb enough to get caught. The thing is, he's had enough fish. We can see Takanori's legs dangling lifeless, and in the final panel, his Twitter account suddenly posts a picture of a black box. Outside of his room, Yuma's dad tries to get him to open the door, but he refuses. There's a loud bang on the door as his father yells at him to open it, and adds that there's a strange smell coming from inside. Story 55. Broadcast. The next day, Yuma's door is straight up off its hinges. He moves it aside and then puts it back as he enters, and the poor kid is pretty beat up. He just sits down and begins the story. It starts with the school broadcast system sounding the bell, but there's also some strange voices coming through as well. The new transfer student is pretty weirded out by it, and that's not the only thing. He's also found that a lot of rooms are off limits at this school, and he even found paper talismans about for warding off evil spirits. One day he starts hearing those familiar voices again and follows them to the broadcasting room. Inside there's a cassette playing, which is where the voices were coming from. He removes the tape, assuming this, as well as the talismans, to be some kind of elaborate prank. As he exits the room, he spots a glossy-eyed girl staring at him. She asks why he went in there, and he tells her he was curious about the noise. She seems to know about the voices and starts to explain to him about how this school works. Apparently it was built on some sacred burial ground, and as long as anyone can remember, it's been haunted. So the students and staff have put up talismans everywhere. And the voices playing through the speakers were actually sutras, ritualistic chants to help keep the evil spirits at bay. They're the main reason everyone can go to school in peace here. Well, realizing he fucked up, the transfer student starts trying to put the tape back, but the girl grabs him by the arm and says it's too late. It seems that she was one of these evil spirits, and on the final page, she laughs and begins snapping his arm in several places. Yuma finishes up the story, and behind him his father enters the room, moving the door aside. He tells Yuma he should throw the door away. He lost that privilege when he stole his dad's suitcase. He then puts a hand on Yuma's shoulder and begins smelling something. Then he asks the boy, "Where is it?" Story 56. Won't forget. Hina's come to visit again, and she seems worried, saying that she tried knocking many times over the past few days, but no one would answer. Then she asks if something happened, and Yuma interrupts her to request she tell the next ghost story. He sits her down at his desk, and she reluctantly begins. A high school student walks out to find it raining and wishes he'd remembered his umbrella. Then he sees his crush, Miyashita, walk by. He blushes as they make eye contact, and when she realizes he doesn't have an umbrella, she offers to share hers. Some other students take notice of this interaction and of course start making fun of them. The boy then awkwardly declines her offer, and the poor girl looks brokenhearted as she walks off into the rain. Worse than that, as Miyashita crosses the street, a car hits her, violently crushing her body as the student watches in horror. The weeks go on, and Miyashita becomes something like a ghost story, with one kid even disappearing after supposedly sharing her umbrella. Later, they found him dead, with blood gushing from his head. The boy feels guilty for what happened, and on a rainy day he waits outside until finally Miyashita appears holding her umbrella. Her face is obscured, but her body looks dirty and damaged. The boy apologizes for that day, confessing that he always liked her and got so flustered when she asked to share the umbrella that he didn't know what to do. He didn't have the courage to join her, and now, because of his pride, she's dead. Miyashita simply asks again if he'll join her, and he realizes that she must be stuck in this same routine, luring others into sharing her fate, all because he turned her down that day. He grabs her by the hand and tells her that he would like to join her. Finally showing her face, Miyashita has tears in her eyes as she tells him she'll never forget him, and she disappears, leaving him with her umbrella. That's the end of this one, and I noticed that Hina's stories usually end on a brighter note than Yuma's. There's always some kind of silver lining. Well, Hina asks what happened to the guy they dragged in, and Yuma tells her she's being a little loud. He quiets her down and tells her to get an answer to her question, she should look under the bed. She kneels down out of frame and screams as the chapter ends. Story 57. Sleep paralysis. Yuma paces around his room in the middle of the night. He says she'll be coming soon. At least I hope. And in the meantime, he tells the next story. A woman is sleeping next to her husband when she wakes up completely unable to move. All she can do is look around. We then see a creepy pair of legs walk into the room all the way up to the foot of her bed. Getting a better look at the entity, it seems to be an emaciated old man with large eyes. The woman decides she must be experiencing sleep paralysis. She believes this old man is simply a nightmare blending with reality, but she can't help but recall something she heard once, that ghosts can bring on sleep paralysis. She doesn't believe in ghosts though, which is why they bought this house under market value even after a horrible death occurred here. Apparently, an old man died when he became immobile and couldn't get up to eat, eventually causing him to starve to death. As she recounts the story, the thin old man starts pointing back and forth between her and her husband, as if trying to decide something. Finally, he starts walking toward the woman and leans over her, sticking his finger between her lips. The woman begins crying in terror as the entity starts trying to pry her mouth open. But since she's completely locked up, he fails and gives up. Next, he walks over to her husband, who's sound asleep, and successfully reaches into his mouth. The woman, of course, can't do anything but watch as the old man reaches elbow deep into his body, eventually pulling out a slimy white form. Maybe this is the man's soul? At that moment, the woman finally wakes up, screaming. She's relieved to find it was all a dream and tries to wake her husband up as well to tell him what happened. The thing is, he doesn't wake up. And at the same time, she hears a strange noise coming from the other room. She opens the door and peeks in, where the old man is eating up her husband's soul like ramen. It's pretty disgusting because even though it's the man's spirit or whatever, his stomach is torn open and the old man is slurping down his intestines. Disgusting. As Yuma finishes up the story, Hina arrives outside his window. It seems they plan on trying to move the body. Hina doesn't think they can do it, but Yuma assures her they can do it if they work together. As they talk, they hear someone in the hall, and Yuma quickly covers him and Hina with his blanket. In the dark, Yuma's father comes into the doorless room as the two shake under his covers. Story 58, Pavlov's Boy. Yuma sits at his desk with a bruised face and swollen eye. He says it all went up in flames and that Hina even saw him being beaten by his father. This is why he didn't want to ask for anyone's help, and he won't do it again. He then moves into the next story. A high school student named Kojima goes into a full-body panic when his phone starts ringing in class. He immediately jumps up and runs out of the classroom and down the hall as he answers the phone. The person on the line gives him a lunch order, and later we see Kojima arrive on the roof with a bag. It seems this was a delivery for a bully, and the kid kicks Kojima hard in the belly, accusing him of being late. The bully's friend says it must be nice having a slave, and the bully tells him it took him a while to condition him this way. Simply by calling his phone, Kojima has developed the involuntary reaction of running as fast as he can to the bully, kind of like Pavlov's dogs. If you're unfamiliar, this was an experiment on classical conditioning where Ivan Pavlov rang a bell every time he fed his dogs. Over time, they developed the response of salivation just by hearing the bell ring, even if there was no food. It appears the bully has trained Kojima to run to him anytime he hears his phone ring. Pretty fucked up. Kojima ominously tells the bully that from tomorrow onward, he won't be seeing him again. But the bully just blows this off. The next day, Kojima has ditched school, but the bully guarantees he'll come if he calls. Kojima doesn't answer, but after a while, someone appears at the top of the stairwell. Finally, they step out into the light, and it's Kojima's headless body. It runs full tilt towards the bully, knocking him off the roof to his death below. As Kojima's body stands there gushing blood from the neck, we follow the blood trail back to his house. There we see Kojima's head on a rope tied to his door. I guess he was trying to end it all when the bully called, and his body, conditioned to respond, ran all the way to the school. Freaky. As Yuma finishes up the story, he hears a rattle at his window. It's Hina, and Yuma begs her to leave, but she's determined to help him. Yuma breaks down crying as she wipes his tears. Story 59, The Tunnel. This chapter starts with Hina standing alone in the room. Yuma shows up and says that everyone is asleep, and then he starts on the next story. It's about a common supernatural event that happens in a local tunnel. People often see two ghosts, a girl running for her life and a man chasing her down. The boy telling us this actually knew the high school girl who died here. Her name was Rui Asuka, and as he lays flowers down at the edge of the tunnel, he hears footsteps. The two apparitions appear in shadow form, acting out that horrible scenario of the man stabbing her to death. The strange thing is, Asuka clearly died in the event, but the killer didn't. So why are there two ghosts? The boy speculates that maybe it's the rumors themselves that have conjured up these phantoms. In order to test his theory, he slowly starts trying to remove any mention of the tunnel ghost from the internet. When he visits the tunnel again, he does see the phantoms, but they're way less visible. It seems he was right, and the stories about the tunnel circulating online are what keep the ghosts here. He goes back to his computer and doubles down on his efforts, but it seems they've backfired in a major way. There are now more posts than ever about the tunnels, and people are freaked out by the fact that any mention of the ghosts online seems to be erased. It's a classic example of the Streisand effect in play, and the stories are more popular than ever. The boy realizes he can't stop the hundreds of posts and goes back to the tunnel to see what effect this might have had. Inside, clear as day, the scene plays out again. Asuka is now fully visible as if she was alive and running for her life. The killer, as usual, stabs her in the back, but this time we see his face. And it's the boys. In his efforts to stop the ghosts, he made the situation worse by spreading the rumors even further. It's an interesting commentary on the internet's obsession with true crime and the sometimes unintentional exploitation of real people's deaths. Yuma finishes the story, but Hina seems lost in thought and a cold shiver runs down her spine. She feels bad for failing Yuma, but he tells her he came up with a good plan and that she should go back home. He grabs her arm to lead her out, but she winces and says that it hurts. They both look at her arm, worried. Story 60. Bug. Yuma says that Hina hasn't come back and wonders if someone found out she's been sneaking out, or if she's just sleeping. Either way, he starts the next story. A woman named Shimizu is listening intently through her earbuds to someone talking when suddenly the signal goes out. In her apartment, we see the walls are filled with photos of a popular streamer. Later, she shows up to the house of a strange man who seems to sell mischievous items to people. He already sold her 2 bugs that she used to eavesdrop on the streamer by sending them to him in the mail. Unfortunately, he found both of them and broke them. But this chick is desperate and will try as many times as necessary. The man then suggests something different, maybe a magical tool. He takes her into a back room where he has a collection of magical items and shows some off, like a love potion for instance. But that's not going to work in this situation. Next, he shows off what he calls a life knife. You can cut a person up with it and they will still live. In the past, its users would cut off the heads of their cheating lovers and keep it alive so no one else could have them. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem like much use either, as Shimizu could never get close enough to cut him. She says that millions of people watch his streams. He belongs to everyone, but Shimizu wants to hear his voice nearby, like he's speaking directly into her ear. The man tells her that he doesn't have anything that would do that, but Shimizu gets an idea and whispers it into his ear. Later, we see the streamer get a fresh load of fan mail, including a little stuffed cat that fits perfectly in his background. It seems that this was another bug sent by Shimizu, who listens intently in her apartment. She's finally gotten what she wanted, the streamer's voice right in her ears. However, he notices blood at the bottom of the cat and cuts it open to find something horrific. Shimizu's severed ears sitting within the cat's stuffing. I guess she used the life knife to cut off her own ears and send them so that she could listen in. Disturbing. Yuma finishes up the story and then finds Hina outside of his window. She seems injured and falls onto his bed. Here we can see bruises have spread all across her arm, much like what happened to the cop. Story 61. Peekaboo. Yuma says he took Hina back to her house and hopefully she can rest and recover. In the meantime, he starts the next story. It begins with a pretty traumatic situation. Social workers are removing a young girl from her mother's filthy apartment where garbage is piled high. The woman screams at them, but they tell her that they have no choice. They've already warned her many times, and the girl will have to come with them. Clearly, the little girl is terrified, but her mother is in denial and tries to play a game of peekaboo to cheer her up. Of course, it's actually scary as hell coming from this unhinged woman. The little girl is happy to escape, and as she turns her back on her mom, the psycho lady breaks down on her knees and looks through her hands as if to finish the game of peekaboo. We see her distorted face through her hands, and it's a nightmare. 10 years pass and the girl is now a teenager living in foster care, and then swears that she hears her mother's voice coming from the closet. It sounded like the words peekaboo. This isn't the first time she's heard her mother's phantom voice, and she lives in a constant state of fear. Her mother has continually requested to see her, but she's denied the visit every time. As she walks around the facility, she continues to hear the voice calling out. One day, one of the caregivers informs the girl that her mother has passed away. She breaks down crying in her room, but feels relieved. Finally, she might find peace, not having to live in fear that her mother will someday get to her. As she cries, she begins to hear the voice again coming from her closet. This time, she confronts the sound and opens the closet, where the ghost of her mother is hanging upside down and playing peekaboo. Only her face is torn up and her eye is nearly falling out of the socket. It's a frightening image for sure. Yuma ends the story and is still really concerned about Hina making the connection between the cop's bruises and hers. Story 62. Chased. Yuma says he stopped by Hina's place on the way home, and it seems her bruises are healing. He looks slightly happier as he moves into the next story. A high school student calls himself a psychic and says that he can see dead people walking around, Sixth Sense style. However, he's not afraid of them. He actually finds them pretty annoying and just ignores them. One day, he notices a ghost walking behind him low to the ground, and is kind of freaked out when he gets a better look. It's a man who's been cut in half at the torso and is following him on his hands and knees like Teke Teke. The kid's never really seen one like this, especially one that wants to follow him, and he's pretty spooked, so he takes off running. The creepy guy chases after him, dragging himself with his hands, and it looks like he's in agony. The kid almost loses the torso around the corner, but surprisingly, the man's legs come running out. Now both halves of the ghost are chasing him down, and they force him to run onto a mountain trail. He almost gets away, but finds the path is blocked by a massive tree that's fallen. It looks like the ghost has led him here on purpose. The kid suddenly notices a pair of legs under the tree and realizes that this must be the man's corpse. He's not really sure what the ghost wants. It seems a little too late to call an ambulance. The worried-looking ghost then pounces over the tree to show the kid something else. On the other side is the man's crushed upper half, and in his arms is a small baby. The kid calls the police and picks up the child, who luckily is still breathing, while the ghost of the man bows his head in thanks. Yuma says that he actually got that story from Hina, which explains why there turned out to be a silver lining. He hopes if she gets better, she'll be able to tell another soon. Yuma's stepmom then enters the room still in a neck brace and says that the police were here looking for Yuma. She raises her voice and asks him what he did. Story 63, Dream After Dream. Yuma enters his room all smiles and says that Hina is all better and the bruises are gone. He's relieved that it doesn't seem to be related to the cop at all and continues on the next story. A father stares down at the dead bodies of his wife and son. He's in shock and suddenly blood appears on his chest and he falls unconscious. He wakes up in bed realizing it was only a dream. He gets up and runs into his son, who asks if he can stay home from school. The father tells him he'll have to power through it, and suddenly he wakes up again, as if that was a dream too. He hears a loud slap and walks into the kitchen, where his wife is slapping his son because he ditched school. The kid apologizes and the father calms everyone down and tries to cheer everyone up, saying he just had a horrific dream, so it's nice to see them all lively. To make sure he's not dreaming again, he pinches himself, but he can't feel a thing. The TV turns on to a strange show, where a man in a mask and a suit talks about dreams. He says it's for the purpose of consolidating information and escaping reality. The father starts panicking, realizing he's still dreaming, and wakes up again. This time he's back in the nightmare where his wife and child lay dead on the floor covered in blood. He falls back again and wakes up to find his family smiling at him in the kitchen. The TV's on and playing the news, where there's reports of an incident in which a boy stabbed his parents before taking his own life. The mother lost her life and the father is still in critical condition. Realizing what's happened, the father doesn't pinch himself this time and instead carries on in the dream with his happy family. It seems he's stuck in an infinite state of dreaming while his body is in critical condition, and he doesn't want to accept the fact that his wife and child are dead. Yuma finishes the story and thinks he'll check on Hina again, but before he leaves his room, his father comes in. He's back home early from work and says that he was worried about Yuma because a dead body was found at the nearby park. It looks like Yuma and Hina did manage to get the body out, but it's been discovered. Story 64, Part-Time Job. Yuma crawls out of bed and fixes his desk lamp, which is knocked over, then begins the next story. Two students get a summer job that seems to pay well, though they aren't exactly sure what the job is, other than it's some kind of call center. When they arrive at the building, it's empty except for two desks with phones and a manual. They read the manual, which says that they're a consultation center for the dead, and they must lend an ear to any concerns the deceased may have. It goes on to say that getting involved with them is extremely dangerous and to keep all of their responses to strictly positive affirmations. The biggest rule is to never ask the dead a question. If they do, they may be taken to the other world themselves. They're unsure if any of this is for real, but they get started anyway. As soon as they sit down, calls begin coming in. Some are angry, some are sad, but the dead mostly feel lonely on the other side and want someone to listen to them. After a long day of calls, the two students are exhausted and start to leave when one of the phones rings. One of the students heads back in to answer it. The door shuts, and when she picks up the phone, she can't hear what the person is saying, so she asks if they can repeat themselves, not thinking about the fact that this is a question. The other student just heads home, and the next day, their friend never shows up. He sits down, ready to start the day, when he hears her voice from the other desk. He's relieved to hear her and asks if something happened when she answered that call the night before. The girl replies, "That's a question, right?" The guy goes around and looks at her desk, only to see that the phone is off the hook. His friend's voice was coming from the world of the dead, and she admits that she was just lonely and wanted some company there, implying that he'll be killed next. After the story ends, Yuma feels defeated now that they found the body. He believes it'll be no time before they connect it to him and Hina. He starts shaking violently and crying, saying that the 100 stories can't end yet. Story 65. The child vending machine. Yuma says it's been 2 days since they found the body and no police have come back. maybe things will be okay after all. He says he'll tell the next ghost story and then go check on Hina. In this story, a woman seeks out a mythical vending machine where you can supposedly purchase children. Their lives were cut short at some point, and the machine gives them a second chance at loving parents. The woman has always wanted children and has traveled deep into the mountains to find this legendary machine. Well, she finally finds it in a clearing in the forest. It's almost comical seeing a vending machine just sitting out in the middle of nowhere like this. Well, she pushes the button on the thing and an aluminum can falls out with the name Mimiko on it. She opens the top and sees an eye peering up at her, calling her mama. Startled, she drops it and a substance leaks out of the can, forming into a small child. It smiles and runs into her arms, and she gladly accepts the little tyke. Just then, a person walks out carrying a box. They kind of look like an elf or maybe an angel, with both pointy ears and wings. Turns out they manage the machine and are here to restock the product. The woman asks the creature if there's any way that they could move the machine to a more populated area so that the kids would have a better chance at being purchased. The angel says no way, it's hard to get to on purpose. It's a trial to make sure that only parents with a strong resolve can find it. That way kids are certain to end up with parents who love them. This actually makes sense, and the woman starts to walk away with her new child as the angel takes some older cans out of the vending machine and places them on the ground. Then, in a shocking turn of events, the angel starts stomping on the cans, which spurt blood. The woman tries to stop her, but the angel says she's just disposing of them. Only so many children can be stored, and these ones are expired. The cans start screaming out for a mother, but the angel continues stomping on them, and they gush blood all over the place. The woman just covers her ears from the screaming children and runs away. Well, that was a creative and disturbing one. Yuma heads off to see Hina when he's stopped by his stepmom. She tells him he can't go out as it's not safe with the killer on the loose. She can't believe such a thing would happen so close to them, and Yuma tries to play along, saying, yeah, and who would have thought it would be a police officer? The only problem is, they haven't identified the body yet. How did Yuma know it was a cop? Story 66, Fence. Yuma sits at his desk trying to convince himself that his stepmother won't have noticed his slip-up and goes into the next story. A boy named Takeo calls up to his neighbor Mamoru to come play soccer with him and some other kids. Just a quick note here, in these panels it looks like Takeo is a ghost or something because he just phases through the fence, and this confused the hell out of me the first time I read it, until I realized that this is just the author's way of showing us Takeo's face through the fence. So there's nothing supernatural here, it's just giving us as a reader a better look. It's worth mentioning because the rest of this doesn't make sense if you think that Takeo's a ghost already. Anyway, Mamoru heads down to play and gets pretty jealous at Takeo's great soccer skills. He decides intentionally to ram into him out of envy, but this causes Takeo to fall headfirst into the iron fence, killing him on the spot. In the following days, Mamoru locks himself in his room out of guilt, and one day he starts hearing a noise outside. He looks out his window to see the shadowy ghost of Takeo staring at him through the fence. The days go on and he just stands there. Then one day he starts speaking, saying he hates this and to let him go. This turns into him screaming, "I want to live," over and over. Despite his fear, Mamoru feels this is all his fault and goes down to the fence to apologize, hoping to set Takeo's spirit free. He walks up to the ghost with his head bowed and apologizes, but when he looks up, he's so shocked he falls to his feet. Takeo's body is being forced into slices through the fence as he begs to be let free. It's a gruesome sight that kind of reminds me of those Play-Doh kits. Yuma finishes the story and his stepmom enters the room saying that they finally identified the body and it was a cop. In fact, it was the one that was here asking questions a while ago. She says that she always knew there was something creepy about Yuma, and now she has her chance to get him out of her house. Story 67, Exorcism Spring. Yuma wonders if he's going to be taken away, but takes no time getting to the next story. The story starts with a sign for an exorcism hot spring that'll do away with lower back pain, stiff shoulders, and spiritual disorders. We then see a man with a creepy demon lady on his back enter the spring. As he sinks into the water, the spirit starts melting and her eyeballs fall out. It's pretty gross. The man leaves feeling better than ever, and the owner thanks him for his patronage. He shows his wife Momoko how much money they made this week, and it appears that she's gravely ill. She wants to stop this whole thing since they're technically lying to their customers. The spring isn't natural, and it's actually just tap water. Her husband defends it, saying that it does cure their customers. Salt is mixed in with the hot water to wash the spirits away, and the only place for them to go is down a drain that's blocked by spiritual talismans trapping them inside. He says that more customers will come if they say that it's a natural spring, and this will lead to more people being aided. If you can tell a lie that benefits everyone, wouldn't that be the most splendid lie? Momoko is still frightened of the spring as she feels she's on the verge of death herself. The next day, Momoko is up and walking around, saying she feels better and insists that they take a dip in the hot spring together. When they get inside, the husband splashes his face when he realizes there's no salt in the water. He then dives under and finds that the talismans have been removed as well. He freaks and says they need to get out of the water, but Momoko grabs him and giggles. He realizes that she tricked him and asks her why she lied to him. Suddenly, dozens of spirits come crawling out to grab him. Momoko repeats the phrase, "If you can tell a lie that benefits everyone, wouldn't that be the most splendid lie?" The ghoulish spirits all start pulling the man under the water in a frenzy. Now that Momoko's a ghost, her tricking her husband benefits all the spirits that are trapped in here, a reversal of what he was doing for the living. As Yuma wraps up the story, a man peeks into his room who's wearing an eye patch and introduces himself as Kido. He says he works for the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Special Countermeasures Department. He asks Yuma if he knows Officer Takayanagi, and the kid denies it. Kido follows up with the fact that they found Yuma's fingerprints on the suitcase the body was in. He then asks the boy to come have a chat with him, but suddenly stops and removes his eye patch, looking around the room and saying, "Something's in here." Okay, who the hell is this guy? Story 68. The Red Book. This chapter starts with Yuma in a different location. It's unclear where, but he's talking under a table. He says that the police think only an adult could have murdered the cop, but they had Yuma hide the body for them. His plan is to just play along, and he starts telling the next story. A girl buys a used exam study guide and finds some helpful sticky notes inside from the previous owner. As she reviews the book tirelessly, she can't help but feel a connection to the girl who's written the notes before her. It makes her feel like she has a study partner, but at the same time, some of the notes are getting pretty negative. The girl tries to encourage her imaginary partner, but instead she starts feeling negative as well, as if the sticky notes are reflecting how bad she feels. The notes get more and more personal, and the girl feels an even deeper connection with the note writer. She finally decides to jump ahead to the end of the book to find out what happened to the girl. It simply reads, "I failed." Just then, from the corner of her eye, we see the shadow phantom of the previous owner run onto the balcony and start to jump. The girl follows and looks down where the ghost has splattered onto the pavement. She feels like she can't let the ghost be alone. She climbs up onto the railing, but at the last minute comes to her senses. As she turns herself around, she slips and falls to the ground below, the study guide still in her hand. As the blood pools around her body, it starts to cover the book, turning it red. And another sticky note appears saying, "Nicely done." I guess you could interpret this in different ways, but to me it seems like the book was haunted, and the evil spirit within it was creating messages to slowly warp the girl's psyche against herself. As the story ends, Yuma quickly sits at the table and hides what he's talking to under it. Kido starts asking him questions, namely, what is it that he's hiding? More specifically, who? Story 69. Turtle. Yuma is exhausted from the trip to the police station, and he mentions that it's now been a whole month since he last went to school. He wonders if he'll ever go back at this point, and then goes into the next story. A young boy named Goro is on his deathbed, and his dying wish is for his mother to feed his ashes to his pet turtle. He believes the calcium from his bones will make the turtle's shell stronger. Once she's done feeding him the ashes, she wants her to let the turtle out to sea, so that Goro can see all the beautiful and terrifying sights along with the turtle. Well, the kid does die, and his grieving mother can't let his dying wish go unfulfilled, even if it's insane. She takes his ashes and starts feeding them to the turtle a little bit day by day. On the final day, she notices how much the turtle has grown, and even stranger, his shell almost looks like a face. The turtle bursts out of his habitat and runs to the front door, signaling that it wants to leave. The mother then brings the turtle to the sea for the sake of her son. As she starts setting the turtle in the sand, Goro's face appears in the shell, opening his eyes and mouth. The mother freaks and drops the turtle. Its head then sinks into its shell and re-emerges, only it has Goro's face now. This is definitely one of the weirdest images in the entire series. Yuma finishes the story and says he needs to go back to the station now, this time by himself. He has a really bad feeling about Kido and how he asked about who Yuma was hiding, but hopefully he meant something else by it. Story 70. Under the bed. Yuma says that Kido is coming by again today and that he's coming to see whoever Yuma is talking to. It looks like we might finally get an answer as to what Yuma has had on his desk this whole time. In the story, a man rolls around on his bed when he finds a long strand of hair that I guess belongs to his girlfriend or something. It falls on the ground and he reaches to grab it, inadvertently looking under the bed, which widens his eyes. There's nothing there, he's just surprised at how much dust buildup there is. After cleaning the place, he decides to grab a frozen meal from the kitchen. But he's disappointed when he finds that they're all gone and figures that Nanako must have eaten them despite saying she's on a diet. He grabs a cup of noodles instead and watches TV when he decides it's about time for bed. As he brushes his teeth thoroughly, he hears footsteps from the room above, which really seems to startle him. Finally, he's about to go to sleep when suddenly the door to the apartment unlocks and a figure starts walking in, causing the man to hide under his bed. He's sweating as the figure walks to the end of the bed and looks down. We see a creepy woman peering in, but she doesn't see him and just says that it must have been her imagination. It seems the man slipped out onto the balcony. It's a perfectly normal woman and she brushes her teeth and eats some ramen before getting into bed and calling her mom. She says she gets really lonely living here by herself. And as she speaks, we see the man laying eyes wide under her bed. It looks like she doesn't know that he's living there. It's another great twist and something that legitimately freaks me out. This one's good to read through twice because you'll notice some gross details like how he brushes his teeth with her toothbrush. Gross. Kido shows up just in time to hear Yuma mention that this is the 70th story. He sits down and looks at the object on Yuma's desk, saying, "So this is why you've gone so far." He removes his eye patch again, and we see that his eye is all white. Kido touches the object and quickly pulls his hand back. His arm gets covered in bruises that are spreading rapidly, but he doesn't seem all that fazed. Instead, he pulls out a straw doll and rubs it on his hand. In an instant, the bruises go away. Like I said before, who the hell is this guy? I didn't expect a character like this to show up, but I'm more curious than ever. This actually explains why Hina and the cop both got bruises. At different times, they both touched the object on Yuma's desk. Story 71, Artificial Intelligence. Yuma wonders about Kido and how he made the bruises disappear, and then starts the next story. This one takes place in the future where AI takes up 40% of the population and they're indistinguishable from humans. A girl named Lisa has decided to jump off the school roof because she's sick of constantly guessing whether she's human or not. The only way to know for sure is to jump. A human will die, but an AI will live and only be disfigured. Her friend, Daiichi, tries to dissuade her from jumping, but she says she'd rather die knowing she's a human than live a lie, where all of her emotions and memories have only been code. He tells her that they've been friends since they were kids, but Lisa explains that AI bodies can grow just like human bodies can. Realizing he won't get through to her, Daiichi instead decides to join her. They can die together as humans. They jump off the roof and hit the pavement below, destroying their bodies. For a moment, all is still, and then Daiichi wakes up spewing blood from his mouth, and he contorts his body to stand upright. Next to him, Lisa does the same. Their bodies torn to pieces, they just start laughing hysterically, realizing that they're both AI. As the story ends, it seems Kido was listening in. He says it's dangerous to interrupt during a story. Then he asks Yuma if he's aware of how dangerous this whole thing is. Kido then tells them how the cop's body was covered in those bruises, and says he knows it wasn't Yuma's fault, but they can put an end to this if Yuma helps him. Story 72. Moro Hakayama Station. Yuma is thinking about how Kido's bruises went away and hopes that this means that Hina will be healed as well. Then he starts on the next story. Two schoolgirls, Mita and Yumi, talk about their crushes and how, since they're graduating soon, this could be their last chance to confess their feelings. Mita says that her crush is the guy that she sees on the train every morning for the last 3 years. She's actually never spoken to him as he's on the other train, but for a brief few moments, they look at each other through the windows. Yumi points out that she's only seen the guy's face though. What if he's a bad guy when she finally meets him? Well, either way, Mita decides to shoot her shot and seeks out his train the next day. She finds him and nervously asks if he recognizes her. He says he does, but weirdly there's 2 speech bubbles, as if he said it twice. Blushing, she asks him if he'd like to get to know her better. The guy says that he thinks it'd be best if they didn't. And once again, it's like 2 voices are speaking at once. Confused, Mita looks behind the guy and sees that his back is identical to his front, as if he's stuck in a mirror. She freaks out and looks up at the sign in the train, which says Moro Hakayama, meaning something like Double Grave Mountain. She steps off the train in fear and looks back at all the people staring at her with creepy eyes. She turns to find Yumi standing in front of her and asks for her help, but when Yumi replies, we once again hear 2 voices, and it seems that she too is doubled. I don't know what to say about this one. This was weird. At the end of the story, Yuma says he's going to ask Kido to help save Hina, but he's also worried about what Kido said. He doesn't want to put an end to the stories. Story 73, Payback. Yuma contemplates how he's going to save Hina while also getting Kido out of his way. But he interrupts himself to start the next story. A man looks through the garbage by his apartment, wondering if there's anything good worth retrieving. He picks up a doll, but when he sees its human-like face, he throws it into a nearby bush and calls it creepy. A week later, on his daily commute, he sees the doll sitting on the steps right in front of him. It seems to smile at him, and he runs away. When he gets back home to his wife, he tells her about what happened, and she wonders if it's Miss Mary, a real Japanese urban legend about a doll that slowly creeps closer to you. He dismisses this, considering she was right in front of him from the start. Either way, his wife suggests that he apologize to the doll if he sees it again. A few weeks go by, and the man is running late for work when he sees the doll sitting in the middle of the crosswalk. He apologizes to it about before and begs it to let him pass. However, the doll makes a really mean face, and he runs away, taking a slower route to work instead. When he gets to work, his boss says there was a bad accident at the crosswalk where he saw the doll. It looks like he's lucky that he took another route. So maybe the doll saved him? Time goes on, and one day, arriving home from work, the man sees the doll outside his front door. He looks up to see smoke coming from inside the house, and worried about his wife, he just runs in, knocking the doll out of the way. He picks up his wife, who's collapsing inside, but the fires rage, and they both burn up. We can hear the man screams from the porch, where the doll sits burning with tears in its eyes. I really don't know if I understand what happened in this one or what the doll's motives are. After the story, Yuma comes up with a plan to save Hina by intentionally causing Kido to bruise. And when he pulls out the doll, Yuma will steal it and use it on Hina. Story 74, Nuisance. Hina is sitting at Yuma's desk, and it looks like the bruises have spread to her neck. Yuma says he's got to run to the electronics store so they can get set up, and asks her to tell a story while he's gone. She doesn't know what they're setting up for exactly, but goes ahead and tells the 74th story. It's about two brothers, Sora and Riku. Sora and Riku, huh? Anyway, the younger brother, Sora, is really jealous of Riku for always one-upping him at everything. One day, Sora tries to outrun Riku and falls on the ground, skinning his knee. His older brother tries to make him feel better by saying, "Pain, pain, go away," and rubbing his knee. This just pisses Sora off, and he slaps Riku's hand and pushes him. Unfortunately, right in front of a large truck, which kills him. His parents try to assure Sora it wasn't his fault, but secretly, we learn that Sora actually pushed his brother on purpose with the intent of killing him. He recounts all the times his brother was a nuisance to him, constantly proving to be a better son. Well, now he can't bother him anymore. At his next taekwondo match, Sora gets a nasty cut, but still wins. However, instead of being proud of Sora, his father says he thinks Riku would have done well too, and breaks down crying. This just sets Sora off. Even in death, his brother is the favorite. He goes to the roadside memorial and starts stomping the flowers when the mangled body of Riku appears and starts muttering the word pain over and over. Riku's face is half torn off, and he stands up walking towards Sora like a zombie. However, instead of hurting him, he says, "Pain, pain, go away," and touches Sora's cheek where he was cut. When he removes his hand, the cut is gone. Even in death, he was looking after his brother, who treated him like shit. Damn. Hina finishes the story and says she's worried about Yuma and his behavior. He's starting to scare her more and more by the day. Just then, Yuma shows up with something that seems to scare Hina. We don't see what it is, but he says he's going to use it on Kido to steal his doll. Story 75, Mirror of the Witching Hour. Kido is uneasy about entering Yuma's room, saying he feels an unnerving atmosphere, but Yuma ushers him in and tells him to wait while he finishes the 75th story. A girl talks about the legend of a large mirror in one of the stairwells at her school. Supposedly, it lets you see a year into the future. If you look at it at 2 a.m., your reflection will either be smiling or frowning, indicating whether you'll be happy or sad a year from now. The girl is more curious about her future than ever as she's about to graduate. In class, the teacher reminds the students to stop breaking into the school at night just because of some dumb rumor. After hearing some students talk about the mirror again and how it actually worked, the girl finally decides she'll try it for herself. That night, she's surprised when the gate is unlocked at the school, and she makes her way to the mirror. She waits until exactly 2 a.m. and then anxiously looks up to see her face in the mirror. Instead of a smile or frown, she finds her reflection has no face at all. She's pretty shocked, and at that moment, a pair of hands grab her neck from behind. It's the teacher from earlier, and he smiles as he chokes her out. I guess that's why her face was blank. She has no future at all. The story ends, and Yuma tells Kido he's probably uneasy because of the girl. It seems this is Hina's cue, and she steps into the room. Of course, Kido is surprised to see her covered in bruises, and at the same time, Yuma runs up, clutching something in his hand and bumping into Kido with it. Kido then lifts up his shirt, where there are bruises covering his body, and he grabs Yuma by the hair, calling him a brat. This is where I'm gonna have to stop the video for now, but I'm honestly surprised at how much this whole thing has escalated. Keto was an interesting character to bring into the mix with his weird eye and knowledge of the dark arts, but what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments. As you might suspect, there will be one more video covering this series, and I'm excited to get to the conclusion. Anyway, shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now, and if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with the name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.